Thank God Steph Curry was off the charts good in game 1 of the playoffs, because if he wasn't, the Warriors may very well be down 0-2 right now. And I feel like a lot of Warriors fans were being a little bit arrogant in terms of facing the Rockets and acting like, oh, that's not serious, and the Warriors are easily going to take care of that team. The truth of the matter is, the way Steve Kerr has been running his lineups, the rotations that he's been playing, and the guys that he has in rotation, any team is capable of beating the Warriors. At least the iteration of the Warriors that Steve Kerr is putting out there. The biggest story of this game, needless to say, is the injury of Jimmy Butler. I don't know what it is with the Warriors players, but they keep suffering these tailbone injuries. Happened to Steph Curry, happened to Kuminga, now it's happened to Jimmy Butler. Now there's a lot of people saying that it was a foul play by Amen Thompson. He deserves to be suspended. Oh, he's a horrible human being. What a dirty play. And believe you me, if somebody actually makes a dirty play, I will call them out on it. To this day, I haven't forgiven Danny Green for all the things that he pulled on Klay Thompson in that 2019 finals. Yeah, you're talking to that guy, and you guys obviously know how much I value Jimmy Butler, and if somebody was doing something dirty to him with intention, oh, I would call out that player to no end. Having said that, you look at all the angles of what happened on that play when Amen Thompson ended up falling and kind of undercutting Jimmy Butler as he was landing after a rebound. Essentially what happened was that Amen Thompson took a shot, he missed it, he tried to go grab the offensive rebound, was boxed out by Draymond, but it looked like he got hip checked by Draymond a little bit. And that's not a dirty play on Draymond. Some people are countering the Amen Thompson argument and saying that Draymond is the one who made a dirty play. But using your hips to ward off somebody from trying to grab an offensive rebound is not a dirty play. That's just physicality and the physical nature of the playoffs. It wasn't even a big hip check. It was more or less Draymond just getting in position. And you can see on this replay, Steven Adams also makes some contact with Amen Thompson. Ultimately, Amen Thompson ends up losing his balance, and that's why he ends up falling to the floor. That's kind of out of his control. Now, a lot of things happened in this game, especially early on, where it just got very physical and the refs were just allowing too much to happen. And well, when you allow too much can happen on the floor. So actually, a number of players ended up getting into foul trouble for both the Rockets and the Warriors. So we don't necessarily have to say that, oh, the refs were specifically targeting just the Warriors. The fouls were being called on both ends of the floor. Dillon Brooks got into foul trouble, and Amen Thompson got into some early foul trouble. But the bottom line is, it happened from a freak play. It was an unfortunate play. It's not Draymond Green's fault, and it's not Amen Thompson's fault. It was a freak play. Freak plays do happen. At the same time, and hear me out, because if you listen to the logic here, it will make sense. For me, the ultimate reason that play happened is because Steve Kerr is running Draymond and Jimmy Butler to the ground at the power forward and center spot. And that is persistently taxing them and forcing them to have to do more from a rebounding standpoint, because it's just those two guys basically half the time on an island trying to protect a bunch of 3-guard lineups. The Warriors have to be stronger from a rebounding standpoint, and it has to be easier than Draymond and Butler stuck on an island against a bunch of giants trying to do it all by themselves. This is completely unfair to these veterans, these old veterans. And think, let's say for example, if Looney was out there next to Draymond and Jimmy Butler, or Trace was out there next to Draymond and Butler, the positions of these players would completely change. For example, it would not be Draymond guarding Amen Thompson out there, it would probably be Jimmy Butler. The whole defensive scheme and the roles of these players change if you put an extra center out there, pegging Draymond down to the power forward spot, and then pegging Jimmy Butler down to the small forward spot. Do you see what I'm saying? If you put Draymond and Jimmy Butler and force them to play power forward and center all night, this stuff is bound to happen, and it's going to continue to happen throughout the course of the playoffs, because you're constantly putting these players into an unnatural position and situation where they should be there for spot minutes. When they go to small lineups in different situations of the game, that's okay. But it's completely and utterly senseless to continue to start the games with Jimmy Butler at power forward and Draymond at center. It's hurting this team from a basic fundamental standpoint, from a basic inability to rebound standpoint, and from the standpoint of having to tax Draymond, Jimmy Butler, and Steph Curry. I'm telling you, when you run these small lineups, Steph Curry has to be more involved from a rebounding standpoint, and that's going to tax him extra as well. This is the NBA. Size matters. Just because the Warriors have certain viable combinations that they can go to from the standpoint of going smaller, it doesn't mean you run it to the ground and take the extreme route of playing small all day and night. The Warriors were once again heavily out-rebounded in this one, 47-33. It really was 47-32. The only reason they had that one extra rebound was in garbage time. When you're persistently being out-rebounded like this and you can't control the glass like any good team would, this makes the Warriors not good enough even when Jimmy Butler is healthy. And even just from a defensive standpoint, they're too small. The Warriors can't guard anybody one-on-one. There's not enough trust defensively for this team when they go this small. Everybody constantly needs help, and it's rotations from the jump and the get-go, and the Warriors just can't get any easy stops. Case in point, they allow 11 points in the first 3 minutes of the game. After the first 5 minutes of the game, it's a 13-7 deficit, and the Warriors have an 8-3 rebounding disadvantage. So this is just not the way you want to start a game from the jump, and the Warriors have been doing this repeatedly over and over and over again. Not just in the postseason, but down the stretch of the regular season as well against the real teams. That small starting lineup has not been working. And on top of that, Brandon Podziemski was feeling ill. He was questionable coming into the game. So the guy is not feeling well. Your starting lineup is not really thriving in any kind of way against this bigger Rockets team. And yes, Steve Kerr insists on going to it anyway. And these rotations are just not serious enough. The first two guys that come off the bench for the Warriors tonight are GP2 and Quinton Post. Now, you know I've already identified some of these small lineups from a big picture standpoint, the whole season standpoint, and we know that a 3-guard lineup of Steph Curry, GP2, Moses Moody next to Jimmy Butler and Draymond, that combination just isn't good enough. It has a net rating of 4.5 on the season. And then in the first quarter, the Warriors are already down, and then Steve Kerr puts out an even less capable defensive lineup of those 3 guards plus Post and Draymond. Needless to say, Post is a weaker defender than Jimmy Butler is. Literally, Jimmy Butler is a better rebounder than Quinton Post. He's a better defender than Post is. So not surprisingly, the Rockets expand on their lead and it's a 20-11 deficit. And then Steve makes more adjustments, and now he's running a 3-guard lineup of Steph Curry, Paz, and Buddy Hield. The most dreaded 3-guard lineup that you can put out there, with Buddy Hield playing the 3, the small forward position. Buddy Hield. And once again, you're asking Jimmy Butler and Draymond to protect that, and that's utterly preposterous. And at that juncture, the Rockets get even bigger because Steven Adams is on the floor, next to Amen Thompson and Tari Eason. I mean, come on, you're combating Steven Adams, Tari Eason, and Amen Thompson with Draymond, Jimmy Butler, and Buddy Hield? It's an unserious lineup. But more importantly, once again, you are taxing the oldest players on the Warriors all day and night. And this is only game 2 of the playoffs in the first round. This is only going to get worse, even if Jimmy Butler comes back and he's well enough to play despite the pelvic injury. And let's pray that he does, because if he doesn't come back soon enough, and he has to miss a few games, it's gonna be wraps for the Warriors. It's over. We literally saw it tonight. The Warriors are not good enough without Jimmy Butler. Steve Kerr is throwing out a bunch of garbage lineups on top of that. The season is over if Jimmy Butler doesn't come back soon enough, and if he has too much pain that he has to deal with even when he does come back, this is gonna be too much to overcome. I mean, my worst nightmare about playing these guys going too small, it's already coming to fruition in game 2 of the first round. Imagine what will happen if they get through the first round and then have to face these better teams in the second round, the third round, and the finals. These guys are not going to have enough tank because they're going to get beaten to the ground on their way there. So yes, that was an incredibly long-winded way of me saying that it's not Amen Thompson's fault and it's not Draymond Green's fault that Jimmy Butler ended up getting hurt in this game. Ultimately, to me, the positions that Steve Kerr has been putting these guys out there, that is what's responsible for what happened in this game. But yes, Jimmy Butler ended up missing the rest of the game. And there's a lot of people that have been pining and wishing for Jonathan Kuminga minutes in the playoffs in the first round against the Rockets. And well, you got it. Non-impact from a POA standpoint, non-impact from a rebounding standpoint, non-impact from a connectivity standpoint, not good enough from an efficiency standpoint. Kuminga in his 4th year is not a playoff caliber player. You play inconsistent players minutes in the playoffs, you're going to get inconsistent results. You know, he has an ultimate opportunity in this game to show out with an opportunity, and he can't guard anybody. He can't keep Fred VanVleet in front of him. He can't keep Jalen Green in front of him. He gets erased on every screen. And this is the kind of play that you want to see in the playoffs with Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler playing together? No, you need players who are willing to fight. And Kuminga, unfortunately, is not the fight type of player. And against teams with more size, he's not going to be efficient or effective from an offensive standpoint either. At least he hit a couple of threes in this game, but you know that he's not going to be consistent enough from that standpoint either. If we're in the playoffs and the other team is leaving Kuminga wide open from the three-point line, is that what you want to see from the Warriors? Is a bunch of Kuminga three-point shots? No! So again, pray for the return of Jimmy Butler and pray that his injury is a minor one. Because if they have to rely on Kuminga instead of Jimmy Butler, it's over. They're not getting out of the first round. But aside from that, Steve Kerr kept putting out unserious defensive lineups. At one point, he had the most dreaded combination of players that you can imagine. The ones that I've been warning about throughout the course of the regular season. And this one is with Buddy Hield, Jonathan Kuminga, and Quinton Post on the floor at the same time. What are we talking about? Under no circumstance, even against the worst teams in the NBA, do you put out a lineup like that, because there is no defensive force with that lineup. You got 3 weak defenders on the floor at the same time. There's no way for the Warriors to recapture any kind of momentum when you're throwing out lineups like that. And you know the refs continue to let the Rockets get away with way too much when it comes to how they guard Steph Curry. They're just literally grabbing him all day and night. At the same time, they're calling touch fouls here and there, and you're just like, why is that being called? But when Steph Curry is being handled like this, I mean, you look at this play, it's insane. The guy is literally being grabbed at the hip while he's shooting, and no foul is called. But yes, in that first half, the Warriors got out-rebounded 24-14. Draymond, Mr. Center, starting center for the Warriors, has 0 rebounds, and he finally grabs one in the final seconds of the second quarter. I can't be the only one who's seeing that the Warriors are too small and failing to grab basic rebounds with Draymond at the center spot, right? This is part of the reason why when the Warriors go to Kevon Looney at the center spot, a lot of these lineups that seem too small become more palatable because he's able to grab these rebounds much better than Draymond. Draymond at this point is a hustle rebounder, but he's nothing close to an elite rebounder as he once was earlier in his career. And Steve Kerr constantly romanticizing who Draymond Green used to be is constantly hurting this team. And you're asking Draymond to do way too much. And boy, with Jimmy Butler out of the equation, Draymond had to get more involved from a playmaking standpoint. The guy had 1 assist and 5 turnovers in this game. Just not reliable enough. In that fourth quarter, he got fouled. They called a flagrant on Jalen Green for putting an elbow into Draymond's face. And the Warriors are making something of a comeback around that time, but they just weren't able to capitalize. Draymond ends up converting only 1 of the free throws, and then the extra possession that they ended up getting from the flagrant foul, they could get nothing better than a Draymond Green 3-point shot that ends up missing, and then the Rockets go and score on the other end, and it's a completely wasted opportunity. There was just not enough help from a scoring standpoint from any of their key rotational players off their bench. Buddy Hield, once again, pretty useless. A cone on defense, 2 for 4 from the field for 5 points. GP2 was more or less a no-show in this one as well, 0 for 3 from the field. And I'm telling you, when you put him in these 3-guard lineups, he doesn't look like the player that he should be if you were to just stick him at the shooting guard spot instead of putting him next to these 2 other guards, forming the senseless 3 guards that are just not effective enough for the Warriors from a defensive standpoint. Guy Santos was also put into some weird situations where they had to overly rely on him with Jimmy Butler out of the equation as well, and he just couldn't stay away from foul trouble. He picked up 4 fouls in the 5 minutes that he got in the first half. Not good enough. Santos is effective for the Warriors when you use him as a plug-in player rather than a core piece player. That's why next to Draymond and Jimmy Butler already in there, Guy Santos as an extra forward is so helpful for this team. Having said that, the only affordable lineups from a defensive standpoint that I saw in this game were the stretches where it was Jonathan Kuminga, Santos, and Loon on the floor at the same time. You always have to look for lineups where the basic size factor is met, and then you have to see who's at the center spot and what combinations are these players playing with. Like if you had Jonathan Kuminga, Santos, and Post on the floor at the same time, that's not going to be good enough. But if Kevon Looney is at the center spot, that's going to be much more palatable for this team from a defensive standpoint. Because let's face it, Kevon Looney is 10 times the rebounder that Post is. So that was really the only time when I felt like the defense was going to be good enough for the Warriors to potentially go on any kind of run. Unfortunately, there were just too many goofy plays, too many turnovers. Steph Curry also had 6 turnovers in this game. Not good enough. Let's think about this for a second. The Warriors had 15 turnovers. Draymond had 5 of them. Steph Curry had 6 of them. At least Steph Curry's 6 turnovers came with 9 assists and a ton of swarming defense around him. What is Draymond Green's excuse? The guy had a third of the Warriors' turnovers. That is just completely inexplicable. But yes, to start that third quarter, it was Quinton Post in the starting lineup, and Pods was back in the game. Unfortunately for Pods, he was just too sick picked to play in this game, he literally did nothing in the 14 minutes that he played. Nothing. 0 stats across the board, 0 for 5 from the field. He shouldn't have played. I appreciate his willingness to fight through whatever he was fighting through, but it's way too much for a second-year player, and the Warriors are at a deficit as it is when he's in the starting lineup. You could have at least brought him off the bench instead of putting him in the starting lineup and forcing the Warriors to have to overcome the deficit of him being in there. I mean, they're not good enough even when he is healthy. Gotta give some credit to Pat Spencer for getting into the game and making an impact from a scoring standpoint, and he had to play because Steph Curry at some point needed to rest and Paz was unavailable. So next man up is Pat Spencer, and from a scoring standpoint, he did a really fantastic job to keep the Warriors in the game in that second quarter. As for Quinton Post, from an overall standpoint, and all things considered, Post did a pretty decent job. At least in the second half of the game, he was put in the starting lineup where he shouldn't be because defensively he's not good enough, not consistent enough. He's a cone if he gets pulled to the three-point line. And you saw the Rockets abuse that situation with Jalen Green, and you just can't have that. His feet are too slow. He's not good enough defensively, nowhere near consistent enough to be playing over the likes of Kevon Looney and Trayce Jackson-Davis as well. Given those circumstances, Quinton Post found a way to help the team with the minutes that he was playing. He hit 4 threes in the second half of the game and was able to keep the Warriors with those shots. But at the end of the day, if you're relying on Quinton Post at the center spot for too long, whatever he's able to give you from a three-point shooting standpoint is negated by everything else that he gives up when he's on defense. And that is more important because you're ultimately giving the other team confidence. And when the other team has enough confidence against you, then the Warriors have no assurance of winning any game against any team in the NBA. If the Warriors defense is unserious, the Warriors are unserious. Having said that, he found some opportunities where he was wide open in that second half, and he was really able to hit some big time shots. And this is why I say Quinton Post should be played for spot minutes. I think his minutes are second quarter and fourth quarter. To start the second and the fourth quarter in the Jimmy Butler centric lineups, that's where you have the potential to take advantage of him maybe hitting some big shots when Jimmy Butler is able to create shots for him. But if he's not getting the necessary spacing that he needs to get those shots off, then in those games you have to limit his minutes. That's the role that I see for Quinton Post moving forward. His role for this team has to be limited moving forward if the Warriors want to play better defense, be able to rebound better, be able to protect the paint better. Because they have enough pieces to be able to do that. They're capable of playing better defense. They're just not doing it because they're not putting out the necessary lineups that are capable of doing so. And that is up to nobody but Steve Kerr. From a big picture standpoint, the Warriors ultimately did their job in terms of taking away home court advantage from the Rockets by winning that first game. And maybe they would have won this game too had Jimmy Butler not been injured. But yes, in terms of how far they can go this season, it's entirely dependent on the health of Jimmy Butler at this point. And my gut feeling tells me that he's going to be able to play. And prayers up to him to ensure that he can come back and help the Warriors get out of the first round. Boy, what I would give to watch the Warriors play some thriving basketball. And again, they have the capacity to do so because they have enough pieces to go bigger and have stronger defensive units. That's what it's all about when it comes to the playoffs. Do you have viable defensive combinations? Can you get enough stops? Can you muck the game and then rely on the greatness of both Steph Curry and Jimmy Butler? Now you have not one, but two greats on the same team. And to be honest with you, with all the extra pieces that they have, that's more than enough for the Warriors to get to the Western Conference Finals alone, just with those two guys going off. But with these vulnerable defensive combinations that Steve Kerr is putting out there, they're capable of losing to any team. And until Steve Kerr is finally able to fix up his ideologies, the Warriors are not going to be good enough to go all the way this season, even with Jimmy Butler coming back. So we'll see if Kerr and his coaching staff are able to make enough adjustments to turn this team into the powerhouse that they have the potential to be. That's all I got for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time.